While everyone is focused on the launch of the new iPhone 15, it's also important to remember that next week when these phones launch, they will still be part of the bigger iPhone lineup, with Apple's older iPhone 14 and iPhone 13 still staying in the lineup at reduced prices that could make them a really good bargain over buying a new iPhone 15, especially if you are planning on going with the base level model, and especially if you're poor. And listen, I'm not insulting you. I used to be poor and broke, barely scraping by on ramen noodles and Burger King coupons. Heck, my first iPhone was an iPhone 5S that I could barely even afford, and I was bullied into buying one from the AT&T store manager when what I really wanted was an iPhone 5C, the cheap one. But then they only had the pink color available, and at the time, I just wasn't secure enough in my own masculinity to buy a pink iPhone. I wanted the green one. But that was a while ago, and the iPhone lineup as a whole was honestly kind of crappy back then if you were a budget-conscious consumer. But that isn't the case anymore. iPhones even just a few years old are still fast, have good cameras, and sport modern enough designs, to the point that when this new iPhone 15 lineup is announced, it may have you wanting to go for an older iPhone instead to save some cash. So for this video, I want to go over how this new mega iPhone lineup will look, how much the price reduction will be on the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 13, and if Apple will keep around the iPhone 13 mini, or if this is your last chance to get that small, modern iPhone that some people seem to just rave about, including me. Now, first of all, let's talk about how Apple usually does the lineup. So for the past few years, Apple has a constant strategy where when the new iPhones launch, this year the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro, they will be making some cuts to the iPhone lineup. And the first thing on that chopping block every single year is the previous Pro model iPhone. So while a lot of people think they can wait out Apple and get a good deal on an iPhone 14 Pro once the 15 Pro is out, well, you won't be able to do that directly through Apple's website. You may have some luck with some third-party stores or something like refurbished models or on eBay, but if you're buying an iPhone 14 Pro from Apple's website, it's just not going to be an option in a week. They are going to kind of like officially discontinue it from the iPhone lineup. However, that is not the same for the regular iPhone 14, and in fact, for the past few generations, Apple has kept the previous baseline iPhone in the lineup at a reduced price point. This year will get even more interesting though, because this is the first time we have the bigger plus-size iPhone in the lineup, and this could mark Apple's cheapest big phone in the lineup, which could end up being a sleeper hit for budget-minded shoppers. So with the iPhone 15 rumored to stay at the same price as the iPhone 14 for $799, and for the plus-size model at $899, well, the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus will probably be getting a $100 price reduction, moving the 6.1-inch size iPhone 14 to $699 and the iPhone 14 Plus to a respectable $799 price point. Now, there are some things to be made aware of if you're planning on buying this cheaper iPhone 14. First of all, the iPhone 14 will still have the notch design, while the iPhone 15 will be getting the brand new dynamic island cutout, which will mean, unlike some previous years, the iPhone 14 will kind of like be instantly recognized as being an older iPhone model. You could kind of get away with having an older iPhone model with like the iPhone 13. It looked pretty much the same as the iPhone 14. Secondly, there's another thing that may prevent you from buying an older iPhone this year, and that is Apple making the switch over to USB-C. They will be removing the Lightning port, which they have been using for the past 10 years on iPhones, and moving over to that USB-C port, which is kind of basically found on all modern mobile computing devices. Now listen, this port switch for many is a welcome one, and going forward, Apple will eventually phase out all Lightning products and accessories from its entire lineup. However, if you are someone that has an older iPhone right now, and you have a lot of Lightning accessories or cables that you don't want to replace, you may find it more beneficial to avoid this change over to USB-C, at least for the time being. I mean, it's inevitable, but for the time being, maybe you want to stick with Lightning. And that could kind of be an argument for the iPhone 14. I know it's kind of like not the best argument, but there is an argument to be made there. And I could also argue complete ambivalence to this port switch. Like, if you already have switched over to primarily charging your phone through MagSafe charging or through wireless charging, and you don't transfer files over the cable, this switch might not even affect you at all. You might not even notice Apple switch the ports. Now, of course, there's another upgrade the 15 will have over the 14, and that is primarily a faster A16 chip and a better 48 megapixel camera system that will be very similar to the iPhone 14 Pros from last year. However, those changes, again, might not be enough to warrant the extra $100 price savings you can get by going for a 14 model. Now, a really, really interesting choice, I think, will be the showdown between the iPhone 14 Plus and the regular size iPhone 15. And that's because the iPhone 15 will be the same price as that 14 Plus. Now, the 15 will obviously have benefits over the 14 Plus, but the 14 Plus should also have benefits over the 15, right? It's gonna have a bigger 6.7-inch OLED display, and people love big displays, and it's still probably gonna have better battery life because it's just a bigger phone and can fit in much more battery capacity than even the new iPhone 15 model. So if Apple's keeping the iPhone 15 the same price and they're reducing the iPhone 14 Plus by $100, you're basically gonna have a choice between two phones at the same $799 price point. And it's like, do you go for the one with the older design, but with the bigger screen and better battery life? Or do you go for the one with the newer design, but it has a smaller screen, but then you have better camera, better chip? You know, yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one. For some users, maybe they'd pick the Plus over that regular size iPhone 15. Personally, I think I'd go for the newer design though. And I'm actually interested to know, based on the current rumors, if you were forced to choose between the regular iPhone 15 and the iPhone 14 Plus at the same price, which one would you go for? Really interested to hear you guys argue this in the comments below. Now, while the $100 price drop on the iPhone 14 is interesting, it may not actually be the best value in this iPhone lineup, and that is because the iPhone 14 was already a very similar phone to the iPhone 13. And guess what? Apple still has the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 12 in the current lineup, so expect the iPhone 13 to take the place of the iPhone 12 in this new lineup at the $599 price point. Now, for that price point, you're still surprisingly getting a pretty modern iPhone. It's gonna have the A15 chip. That is the same chip found on the iPhone 14. You're still getting the notch design. You're still getting a dual camera system. You're gonna get similar battery life to the iPhone 14. And the biggest difference between the iPhone 13 and the 14 is mostly software-based features like the new action mode for more stabilized video and cinematic video at 4K resolution at 24 frames per second. Again, not really big features that most people probably even use, and probably not worth spending an additional $100 just on the iPhone 14 for those features. Although one thing that could be worth it is that the iPhone 14 does have a better front-facing camera and it does have autofocus. I really like that upgrade on the iPhone 14 in general. I love the new front-facing camera. So even that's a bit of a stretch, but I could see people going, okay, I take a lot of selfies, I take a lot of video with the front camera. I'm gonna make that upgrade, spend an extra $100. Why not? But yeah, the iPhone 13 at $599, that's kind of hard to beat. And again, it's a pretty unique situation because the iPhone 15 is technically only going to have one chip generation newer than what is found on the older iPhone 13 due to Apple making the A17 chip exclusive to the Pro models and then designating that older A16 chip found on the iPhone 14 Pro as the new iPhone 15 chip. So for $599 with modern specs and a phone that very much looks like the current iPhone 14, it could end up being the best deal in the entire 2023 and 2024 iPhone lineup. The only thing that could possibly beat the value, and this is a big question on everyone's mind right now, okay, maybe it's just my mind, will Apple keep the iPhone 13 mini in the lineup, or will they discontinue the mini in favor of keeping the iPhone 12 around for another year in the lineup at the $499 price point? Yeah, this is a tough one. I can see Apple going either way right now. Either they will discontinue the iPhone 13 mini and keep the iPhone 12, or they will discontinue the iPhone 12 and keep the 13 mini. And I am hopeful that Apple decides to get rid of the iPhone 12 and keep the 13 mini around for one more generation, because if Apple does keep the 13 mini, it will have the same specs as the regular iPhone 13, minus having a smaller screen and I guess a smaller battery, but it will still have really great features and come in at an amazing price point of just $499. It's truly the iPhone SE we deserve, because that current iPhone SE they have is priced at $429 and still has the iPhone 8 design. Listen, I love the iPhone mini. I am sad that it didn't succeed as a product. I am sad that Apple isn't updating this product, but if it stays around in the lineup and it if it has a $499 price point, I will be recommending that phone to so many people. It will truly be the iPhone SE that Apple should have made. Speaking of the iPhone SE, that also has an A15 chip, so if Apple keeps the 13 mini in the lineup, they could have a lineup that is full of phones with the A15 chip, giving users maximum flexibility in their choices without worrying about picking a slower phone and ensuring plenty of iOS software updates for the foreseeable future. Of course, the iPhone SE will stay in the lineup, but honestly, I am hoping for some sort of price reduction right now because at $429, it's just kind of a bad deal in my opinion. I think the most we could hope for is probably like a $29 price cut, bringing it down to $399. That would be better, but even then at that price point, I still think it's kind of for what you're getting. So I would still probably recommend getting something like a 13 mini or an iPhone 12 in the lineup if it's $100 more than the iPhone SE. But basically, that is going to be the new 2023 iPhone lineup in its entirety, and I think it marks one of the best valued lineups that we have ever seen from Apple, with phones ranging from $400 to $1,200, with very few compromises this year for going with an older model. And of course, these price cuts will go into effect once the iPhone 15 is announced at Apple's September 12th Wonderlust event. So don't buy an iPhone right this second. If you're looking to save some money on an iPhone, just wait for September 12th and they will all magically get a price reduction. And while people are focused on maybe buying a $1,200 iPhone 15 Pro Max, you can walk away with a phone, maybe even at half the price, that's almost just as good. And if you want more info on the iPhone 15, you gotta get subscribed because things are just getting started. We got a lot to cover next week. That event is only 1 week away at this point. Yeah, it's gonna be busy. I really did want that iPhone 5C, by the way. It was unapologetically plastic. I still love the colorful design. I think about it almost every single day.